My husband went to the bank every Tuesday at exactly 2 o'clock. For 38 years, it was as regular as the mail. If it was raining, he took an umbrella. If it was hot, he wore a cap. If he had a cold, he still went. He'd straighten his collar in the hallway mirror, pat his pockets for his wallet, and pick up his keys with the same calm motions. Sometimes I watched from the kitchen while I wiped the counter or rinsed a cup. The clock would click toward 2. He'd move through the house like he had a quiet appointment with himself. When I asked why he needed to go that often, he'd lean in, kiss my forehead, and say, "Just keeping our future secure." I believed him. Bob was an accountant. Numbers were his language. Neatness was his comfort. Our bills were paid early. Our taxes were filed before anyone else on our street even gathered their forms. When he said things were handled, I let myself accept it. On the day he died, I was at the grocery store picking through avocados, pressing gently for softness. The store speakers were playing something slow and forgettable. My cartwheels squeaked every few feet. My phone rang. David. His voice sounded flat and careful, like he was holding something fragile with both hands. "Mom," he said, "you need to come to the hospital. Dad collapsed at work." I remember standing still beside the fruit display, one hand on the cart handle. People moved around me like I was part of the aisle. By the time I got to the hospital, Bob was already gone. "A massive heart attack," the doctor said. "Quick. Probably not much pain." At the funeral, I didn't cry. People kept studying my face, waiting for it to happen. They brought casseroles and paper plates and spoke in low voices in my living room. The truth was, I felt something closer to relief. Not because I hated him, I didn't, but under the shock and exhaustion, I felt like I could finally breathe. I just didn't understand why. 3 days later, a plain white envelope arrived with my name typed on the front. No return address. Inside was a single sheet from First National Bank. It expressed condolences. It mentioned a safe deposit box. It said I was listed as the secondary holder. It said the lease was paid through the end of the year. It asked me to contact them to arrange access. I read it 3 times at the kitchen table, the paper held with both hands. A safe deposit box. In 38 years, Bob had never mentioned it. I called the bank that afternoon. A woman answered with a practiced, gentle tone. Yes, the box existed. Yes, it was registered to Robert Thompson with Margaret Thompson as co-holder. Yes, I could access it. "Would Thursday at 10 work for you?" she asked. "Thursday," I repeated, as if I needed to hear it out loud. Yes. After I hung up, I moved through the house like I was visiting it instead of living in it. I opened drawers Bob had organized. I looked at folders labeled in his precise handwriting. Everything appeared normal, too normal, like a life staged to look stable. On Wednesday evening, David came by. His tie was loosened, and his eyes were rimmed red. He sat in the kitchen chair where Bob used to sit and rested his hands on the table as if he needed something solid. "Mom," he said, "we need to talk about Dad's finances." I didn't answer right away. I poured 2 glasses of water and set one in front of him. The glass clinked softly on the wood. He opened a folder and slid papers across the table. Bank statements, investment reports, account numbers I didn't recognize. "Did you know Dad had 3 checking accounts?" he asked. "3?" I said. "No, we only have the joint account." He pointed to columns of numbers with his finger. "This one's been empty for 6 months, this one closed last year, and this one," he tapped the page, "has $43. The room tilted slightly, the way it does when your body tries to reject what your eyes are seeing. "That's not possible," I said. "Our retirement alone should be—" David's expression answered before his words did. "Mom," he said quietly, "I can't find it. Any of it." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The Tuesday bank trips replayed in my mind like a film I couldn't pause, the way he'd pat my hand and say, "Don't worry about the boring money stuff. I've got it covered." Thursday morning came cold and gray. I dressed carefully in a navy blazer and slacks, not morning clothes, something closer to armor. David offered to come with me, but I told him no. Whatever was in that box, I needed to see it alone first. At the bank, a manager named Patricia met me at the entrance. She had sympathetic eyes and a professional smile. She led me down a hallway to the vault, where the boxes lined the wall like metal teeth. She used 2 keys, hers and the one she handed me, and opened box 847. "I'll give you privacy," she said, guiding me into a small room with a table and a single chair. The box was heavier than I expected. I carried it to the table and set it down. For a long moment, I just stared at the plain metal. Then I opened it. The room they gave me was small and quiet, the kind of privacy that feels borrowed. A plain table, a chair with a stiff back, a little lamp that made everything look slightly yellow. The vault was on the other side of the wall, and every so often I heard a faint metallic sound, like a distant drawer sliding shut. I opened the box and let the lid rest back on its hinge. Inside were folders, more than I expected, thick ones neatly labeled in Bob's handwriting, the letters straight and controlled, as if the ink itself had manners. For a few seconds I didn't touch anything. I just looked. The sight of his handwriting in that room felt strangely intimate, like I had walked into a part of our marriage that wasn't mine. I pulled out the top folder. It was labeled Investments, Actual. The word actual made my throat tighten. Not retirement, not safe. Actual. I opened it slowly. The first pages were statements, printed and stacked in order, each one clipped cleanly to the next. The numbers didn't make sense at first, because my mind wasn't ready to read them as real. Losses, red ink, charts sloping down, account names I didn't recognize, Bob's name, only his name. I turned another page, and another. There were notes in the margins, small calculations, dates, arrows pointing to totals. He'd been tracking it the way he tracked everything, methodically, even as it fell apart. I felt my hands begin to shake. I pressed my palms flat on the table for a moment and held my breath until my fingers steadied again. Then I reached back into the box and took out the next folder. Home Equity Loans. 3 sets of documents, each one in its own sleeve, each one signed, stamped, formal. The house address, the loan amounts, the interest rates, the payment schedules, the total balance written clearly near the front, $270,000. I sat back in the chair without meaning to, as if my body needed more space from the numbers. The chair creaked softly under me. The air felt thin. I opened my mouth and realized I wasn't breathing properly, just short little pulls of air. I put my hand on my chest and forced a slower inhale. In, out, in, out. I stared at the papers until they stopped blurring. The loans were against our home, the home I had painted 3 different colors over the years, the house where we had raised our children, the backyard where I had planted roses and watched them come back each spring. I told myself I must be misreading something. I wasn't. I set that folder down and reached for the third one. It was labeled in careful letters, Maggie's Accounts. I didn't understand the label until I opened it. Credit cards, applications, statements, offers, notices, 15 separate accounts. My name, my social security number, and signatures that looked like mine at a glance but weren't. Not the way my hand actually moved. Not the way I looped my letters, not the way I pressed into paper. I turned one page and saw a photocopy of a driver's license. Mine. Then another page with a different application, another signature, another balance. I found the total written in Bob's handwriting on a yellow sticky note tucked inside the folder, $96,000. My stomach turned cold. It wasn't just debt. It was identity theft. It was fraud. It was my life being used as a tool. For a long time, I sat there and did nothing. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even close the folder. I listened to my own breathing. I listened to the faint sounds in the vault hallway. I stared at the edge of the table where the veneer was slightly chipped, like someone had tapped it too hard years ago. Eventually, I leaned forward and looked back into the box. At the bottom was an envelope, thick, cream-colored, my name written on the front in Bob's handwriting. I picked it up and turned it over once in my hands, feeling the weight of whatever he had decided to leave me last. I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter, folded in thirds. I read the first line and felt something inside me go very still. Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm already gone, and you found the box. I didn't rush through it. I read slowly, line by line, letting each sentence land fully before moving to the next. He wrote about an investment 5 years ago, about trying to fix it, about Tuesday trips to the bank, about digging deeper, about the home equity loans, about the credit cards in my name. He wrote that he did it to buy time. He wrote that he thought he could fix it before I ever had to know. And then he wrote the words I had not expected to see in his careful handwriting. By the time you read this, we're probably bankrupt. I folded the letter back the way he had folded it and put it in the envelope again. I set the envelope on the table and looked at it like it belonged to someone else. I stayed in that chair until my hands stopped shaking. I didn't try to make sense of it emotionally. I just let the facts settle. Then I did the first practical thing I could think of. Now, step 1, I put every folder back in the box in the exact order I found it. Step 2, I walked out and asked Patricia for copies of everything. Step 3, I asked for the name of a lawyer who handled financial fraud. Patricia's face shifted when she saw my expression. Her professionalism held, but her eyes widened slightly. "I'll make the copies myself," she said. "And I'm truly sorry, Mrs. Thompson." When I left the bank, the gray sky hadn't changed. The parking lot looked ordinary. I sat in my car with my hands on the steering wheel and did nothing for a full minute. Then I drove home. David's car was already in my driveway. He met me at the door, his face tight with worry, holding a paper in his hand like it was burning him. "Mom," he said, "I found something else." I stepped inside, set my purse down, and looked straight at him. "Don't tell me," I said quietly. "There isn't a life insurance policy." He blinked, stunned. "How did you—" "Because your father spent the last 5 years destroying everything we built," I said, and my voice stayed level. "And apparently he was thorough." I walked into the kitchen, pulled the copies Patricia had given me from my bag, and spread them across the table. "Sit down," I told him. "We have work to do." Then I waited while his eyes moved over the pages. David read in silence. His eyes moved slowly, line by line, the way you read when you're afraid of missing something important. The kitchen clock ticked behind us. The refrigerator clicked on, then off again. I stood at the counter and rinsed the same mug twice, just to keep my hands busy. When he finished, he didn't look up right away. He kept his gaze on the papers, like they might rearrange themselves if he stared long enough. "This is bad," he said finally. "This is really bad." "I know," I replied. He looked at me then, really looked. "The house, your credit, your retirement, everything." "I know." His forehead creased. "How are you so calm?" I sat down across from him and folded my hands on the table. "Because panic won't change the numbers," I said, "and anger won't fix paperwork." That was the moment something shifted, not outwardly, inside. I realized that if I let myself fall apart, everything else would collapse with me. Bob had handled the money. Now he was gone, which meant I had to handle what was left. Step 1, I needed facts, not guesses, not fears. Step 2, I needed professional help. Step 3, I needed to stop assuming shame belonged to me. I told David the lawyer's name Patricia had given me, Jennifer Rodriguez, financial fraud, identity theft, quiet competence. We'll meet her, I said, as soon as possible. That night after David left, I sat alone at the kitchen table with the folders stacked neatly in front of me. I didn't open them again. I just sat there, listening to the house settle. Pipes clicking, a branch brushing the window. I thought about the letter, about Bob's careful explanation, about how many Tuesdays he'd spent trying to outrun his own decisions. In the morning, I made coffee and put the phone face down while it brewed. Jennifer's office was bright and orderly, with windows that looked out over downtown Portland. She listened without interrupting while I explained the safe deposit box, the loans, the credit cards, the forged signatures. I placed the copies on her desk, one stack at a time. When I finished, she leaned back slightly and folded her hands. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, "I'm going to be very direct with you." I nodded. "This is spousal financial abuse," she said. "It's fraud, it's identity theft, and it's serious." The word abuse landed heavier than I expected. I didn't argue with it. "But he's dead," I said. "What can we actually do?" "We can prove you weren't complicit," she replied. "We can challenge the debts tied to forged signatures. We can contest the home equity loans, but it will take time." "How much time?" 6 months, she said, "possibly a year." "And money," I said. She didn't deny it. I thought about the $43 David had found. I thought about the empty accounts. I thought about the house keys in my purse. "Tell me what to do," I said. She slid a yellow legal pad toward me and wrote as she spoke. Step 1, fraud reports with the credit bureaus. Step 2, disputes with every creditor tied to forged signatures. Step 3, documentation, everything, no gaps. I copied the steps into my notebook carefully. That evening, Emily called. Her voice was hesitant, guarded. "Mom," she said, "are you sure about all this?" "I have the documents," I said, "and your father's letter." There was a long pause. "Dad wouldn't do that," she said quietly. "He loved you." "I know he loved us," I said, "and I know what he did." She ended the call soon after. No argument, just distance. The weeks that followed were full of forms and phone calls. Jennifer filed reports. A handwriting expert confirmed what I already knew. David helped organize everything into labeled folders. He didn't complain. He just worked. One evening, as we sat sorting papers, he looked up at me. "Mom," he said, "I need to tell you something." I set my pen down. "A few years ago, Dad asked me to invest with him, a startup. He wanted $50,000, said it was a sure thing." My chest tightened. "Did you?" "No," he said. "Sarah didn't trust it. She said if it was guaranteed, he wouldn't need our money." I nodded slowly. "I think he was already in trouble," David said. "And if I'd said yes, we'd have lost everything too." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You didn't," I said. "That's what matters." 3 months after Bob's death, we got our first small victory. 2 credit card companies removed the balances from my report. The letters arrived in plain envelopes, unemotional and official. I laid them side by side on the table and read them twice. It wasn't a solution, but it was proof. I put the phone face down. Then I waited for the next step. The next step took longer. The home equity loans didn't move the way the credit cards had. Their letters were thicker. Their language was colder. They argued that as Bob's spouse, I had benefited from the money, even if I hadn't signed for it. The phrase appeared more than once, printed neatly as if repetition might make it true. Jennifer explained it to me one afternoon in her office, tapping a paragraph with her pen. "They're saying the marriage itself counts as consent," she said. I sat back in the chair and looked at the window. Traffic moved below, steady and ordinary. "And you disagree." "I do," she said, "but they won't back down easily." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means court." The word didn't scare me the way I thought it might. It felt heavy, yes, but also clear. Court meant facts, documents, someone neutral deciding what mattered. The date was set for late November, 6 months after Bob's death. In the meantime, I did something I hadn't planned on doing at this stage of my life. I looked for work. At 64, with a resume that stopped making sense somewhere around the early 2000s, I wasn't optimistic. I applied anyway. Bookstores, cafes, anywhere that needed someone reliable more than impressive. A small independent bookstore downtown called me back. The owner, Ruth, had silver hair and sharp eyes behind red-framed glasses. She read my resume once, then looked up at me. "You worked as a librarian," she said, "and now you want a job." "Yes." "May I ask why?" I considered my answer, then decided not to soften it. "My husband died," I said. "I found out afterward he stole my identity and destroyed our finances. I'm trying to keep my house." Ruth studied me for a long moment. Then she smiled slightly. "When can you start?" The work wasn't glamorous. Shelving, inventory, recommending books. But it gave my days a shape, a reason to get dressed, a place where I was useful without explaining myself. On slow afternoons, Ruth and I talked while we restocked. She told me about her own marriage, long-ended. "People told me I was overreacting," she said once, sliding paperbacks into place. "They always do." I nodded. I understood that language now. As the court date approached, Emily still wasn't speaking to me. David said to give her time. I wasn't sure time alone could fix what disbelief protected. The hearing itself was quieter than television makes it seem, smaller. The judge listened. Jennifer laid out the evidence carefully. The forged signatures, the expert testimony, Bob's letter. When I took the stand, I answered simply. I didn't argue. I didn't defend my character. I stated facts. I trusted my husband. I did not sign those documents. I did not receive those funds. When the judge ruled in my favor, releasing the liens, I felt something inside my chest loosen, not joy, relief. Outside the courthouse, the air was damp and cold. David hugged me briefly. Jennifer shook my hand. That night, Emily called. She'd gone to the bank, she said. She'd asked questions. She'd seen the records. There was a credit card in her name, too. "I didn't want it to be true," she said, "but it is." She came over later. I made tea. We sat at the table and talked quietly, the way we hadn't in months. After that, things began to settle into a new order. The bookstore became more than a job. Women started asking questions. One afternoon, someone asked if I knew anything about financial abuse. I said yes. We talked for an hour. Ruth noticed. "You're good at listening," she said. So we made space for it. A few chairs in the back room once a month, coffee, no speeches, just stories. The group grew slowly. On the anniversary of Bob's death, I went to a different bank. I opened an account in my own name. Only mine. I deposited my paycheck. It wasn't much, but it was real. The teller asked if there was anything else. "Yes," I said. "I'd like to change the name on the account." I used my maiden name. When I walked out, I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady, and that was enough. Then I waited. The support group met on a Tuesday evening, once a month, after the bookstore closed. Ruth locked the front door, flipped the sign, and put on a kettle in the back room. We arranged the chairs in a loose circle, nothing formal, no sign-up sheet, just women showing up, some nervous, some quiet, some already tired. The first night, there were 6 of us. I didn't lead it the way people expect leaders to lead. I didn't stand. I didn't give advice. I sat in my chair with my hands folded and listened. When it was my turn, I told my story plainly. The Tuesday bank trips, the safe deposit box, the forged signatures, the court hearing, the months of paperwork. I didn't soften it, and I didn't dramatize it. When I finished, no one spoke right away. We let the silence sit. Then one woman nodded. Another took a breath. One of them cried without apologizing for it. After that, the group grew, 10 women, then 15, then more. Some stayed for one meeting, some came every month. We shared practical things, lawyers' names, how to request credit reports, what words to use on forms. But mostly we shared recognition, the relief of being believed. The bookstore became my steady place. I worked my 3 days. I recommended novels. I restocked shelves. I drank coffee from a chipped mug Ruth insisted was perfectly good. I walked home in the evenings with tired feet and a clear head. Emily's credit was eventually cleared, just like mine. David set up the college fund for his kids with locks and safeguards no one else could touch. We didn't talk about Bob much anymore, not because we erased him, but because we no longer needed to defend or explain him. On what would have been my 39th wedding anniversary, I went to the bank again. Not First National, a different one. A place with no memories attached. I opened an account in my name only. I deposited my paycheck. The teller smiled and asked if there was anything else she could help me with. "Yes," I said. "I'd like to update the name on the account." She typed as I spoke. I used my maiden name, Margaret Sullivan. Not as an act of anger, not as a rejection of the past, just a quiet correction, a way of acknowledging who I was before and who I had become. That evening I came home, put the kettle on, and wiped down the kitchen counter. I sorted the mail. I set out clothes for the next day, ordinary things, comforting things. Later, I thought of a woman who'd come into the bookstore the week before, hesitating by the shelves, not quite ready to ask her question. I made a note to check in with her next time she came by. Some people need time, some need proof, some just need someone to sit with them while they figure out the next step. If you stayed with me through this story, thank you. If it felt familiar in any way, I'm glad you're here. Please like and subscribe. It helps this channel grow in a quiet, steady way. Let me know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. I read those. 2 popular stories will appear next.